Mandatory PCA. Emily is here. Well, she's a CP baby today. And Ellie is here as well, and she is feeling extra chatty, so if you hear something, it's probably Ellie. Anyway, hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and here we talk about harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. And today, we're going to discuss the reason women divorce their husbands per Legion of Men. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Legion, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content he puts out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources, and now onto the reason we're all here. I would like to thank a subscriber for sending me this video and introducing me to this channel, which I've somehow never heard of despite it having over 400,000 subscribers. It seems there's no shortage of large channels making bank on how awful women are. Anyway, Legion claims to be rehabilitating men, masculinity, and brotherhood, and yet these are his latest video titles. Women are frustrated in the job market as life gets hard. Women are upset men are treating them like equals and refusing to help for free. Women are mad AF over gyms banning them from filming and recording for internet clout. Husband finds out his wife was cheating at her funeral coming home from the affair. The video we'll be looking at is "This is why women divorce their husbands and leave relationships." I did have way too much fun reading those titles. Anyway, in this video, Legion is offering his commentary on an interview between the Diary of a CEO and Esther Perel, a psychotherapist that specializes in relationships. His takeaways from their discussion are unique. Let's get into it. We open with Esther noting that sex isn't always politically correct, and basically having a fantasy of, let's say, being handcuffed during sex doesn't mean you want someone to just handcuff you. You discuss it, you consent to it, you have a safe word if you change your mind. Consent is very important here, and Esther even mentions it. The CEO then asks if Esther is seeing couples struggle with newly defined gender roles as it relates to their sex lives, and I'm wondering what he's talking about, but Legion says yeah, and, well...
Yes, the insane hoops you have to jump through with consent. You have to ask for consent before and multiple times during. They want you to write this down on paper now. You have to get it signed just to save your ass and make it ironclad in the kangaroo courts of, college campuses. You're also expected as a man to read a woman's mind and know what she wants, which we know that no doesn't always mean no. And yes doesn't always mean yes, but you're supposed to make this distinction as a man, because if you don't and you want to get this written on paper or you cross the wrong line, then that's your ass also. Yet they tell you that communication is key, but don't want to communicate this to you overtly because you're a man, you're supposed to know this. It's actually unattractive. It turns them off if you don't. So when you try to communicate and get the consent they ask for, it turns them off. When you do things instinctually as a man, and the no doesn't always mean no, because if you have any bedroom experience, you understand. Playful no's, then that's attractive. Yet society tells men that the moment you hear no, period, you need to stop dead in your tracks just to be safe. Yet that turns women off. It is more confusing today than it's ever been because we muddied the gender roles, because this insane expectation placed on one side to know all the rules, to read minds, and deal with all the consequences, all wrapped into one. Yet the other side tells you that you're the one that's bad at communication.
I assume they is alternately society and women. Anyway, I have no idea what he means by muddied gender roles and how they're connected to consent. Consent has always been important, but it hasn't always been treated as important. And that it's now considered important is a good thing. And if someone is giving you playful no's, just stop. If they didn't mean it, well, sucks for them. Maybe they'll learn not to say things they don't mean in the future. And yes, you should get consent before and throughout. And I don't understand why that's considered a hardship. Do you not want to sleep with someone who actually wants to be there? Do you really want to be intimate with someone who's just going through the motions because you want to? And getting consent doesn't have to be stopping and asking, are you still good? You should be aware of your partner in general. And as for this notion of signed consent forms, that's ridiculous. For one, consent can be revoked at any time, and prior consent doesn't mean continuous consent or consent to everything. And for two, how would you prove the consent form wasn't signed under duress or forged? The only thing I agree with Legion on is if you hear a no, even a playful one, walk away. But then...
We've seen it many times. One accusation lobbied your way, untruthfully, and you will get ruined. You get hung out to dry in the public square. People will absolutely destroy your reputation. Your friends will look at you differently. Your family looks at you differently. They get to remain anonymous. You get dragged through the mud and paraded around the city square. It's insane. It's not worth it, at least in the West. You can still act like a regular man and a regular woman and expect to have some fun in the bedroom without this consent forms and all this crazy shit going on college campuses and other parts of the world, I'm sure. But here in the West, where we have radicalization of the fourth wave gynocracy, where every single little thing is your fault as a man. You're an enemy, you're a predator, it's the patriarchy oppressing them, all this stuff, it's not in your favor, especially with the kangaroo courts. Don't risk it.
I don't know why Legion is acting as though consent is a ridiculous modern notion, or that if you don't jump through all these insurmountable hoops, you'll go straight to jail. Regardless of your sex, you should want consent, and at least in the US, out of 1,000 rape cases, 13 are referred to prosecutors. Rape is also the most underreported crime. 63% of sexual assaults are not reported, while the prevalence of false reporting varies between 2 to 10%. And Legion goes off again, telling us that men should marry or get into long-term relationships, but not in the West because laws are messed up. But a wife is protection for a man. People went after Joe Rogan for racism, but they couldn't for sexual assault because he was married. And if you're wondering who his example is of the multiple men who have had their empires crumbled, their dreams crushed by one piece of poon, it's Russell Brand. I find Legion's choice curious, as Brand has faced allegations and complaints before, and he's married, so it's hardly something new that just came out of nowhere. And though YouTube demonetized his channel is still there, and he still has his deal with Rumble. His other example is Andrew Tate, which he admits he doesn't know what's going on there, but it's getting dragged out. So basically, Legion is telling his viewers that, at best, sexual assault isn't as prevalent as it actually is, and at worst, it isn't real, it's just something women use against men for reasons. And from the sounds of it, being accused of sexual assault is actually worse than being assaulted. Thanks. We go back to the video, and Esther mentions that most of the research on desire is about women, and that says we think women have challenges around desire and men don't have to be researched because the assumption is that men are always interested, they just need an opportunity. Esther says this isn't true, and I agree with her. Men are not sex machines. They can and do have standards and preferences, and thinking that men are always down for sex is how you end up with people dismissing cases of female teachers raping their male students, or dismissing cases of male sexual assault because, well, don't men always want it? He should be grateful. It's gross and dehumanizing, and Legion disappoints me by totally missing the point and saying that for men, it's very straightforward. See it, want it. And for women, it's more complex and thus more interesting, and of course, men want to know about it. I do think men are more complicated than that, and that's not a bad thing. And it's fine for men to be curious about women's desires. The problem comes in when men try to fit all women to a study. Or they just read a headline and make assumptions based on that, even if the study itself has a different conclusion. Anyway, Esther speaks some more. The CEO tells a story about how he and his partner were speaking different sex languages, and
it's difficult to want to have more sex by talking about not wanting to have sex.
That's such a big point, dude. This communication thing, I'm telling you, man, it's not how it works. Talking about your problems doesn't fix the problems, even though like therapists tell you all the time, go to couples therapy, go to marriage counseling. Let's talk about our problems. That changes nothing. The underlying issue is you. It's the other person. It's the actions you have together that are causing you to butt heads in a relationship.
I do agree that just talking about the problems won't solve the problems, but some level of communication will be necessary, and his example, well, he talks about how you get so enmeshed with your partner that you lose sight of who you are, and then your partner loses respect for you. And I do agree that in a relationship, it's very easy to forget who you are, and it's also easy to take your partner for granted, and I agree that relationships take work, but I don't agree with his conclusion.
That's when you have to keep grinding, keep improving, keep becoming better, keep getting more hobbies, become more interesting, learn new things. You have to stay fresh now for the person you're spending the rest of your life with. You can't stagnate.
People should always be improving, but you should be doing that for yourself, not to try and stay interesting for your partner. And if something new appeals to you, great. But you don't have to continually force yourself to pick up new hobbies lest your partner become bored of you. People are not a circus act, and women are not children that have to constantly be amused or they'll wander off. But Legion thinks differently.
This is why I tell guys it's super important, dude. This is how you keep your woman. You always have to be improving. It doesn't matter. You always have to be Mr. Interesting. And you can never, ever break on your boundaries. This whole maintaining frame thing is literally everything. It underpins the foundation of your relationship. Your frame is what builds that pyramid up of all the other points of attraction.
It is good and healthy to have boundaries, and it is also good and healthy for men to have boundaries. And you don't have to try to call it frame. Boundaries are for everyone, and you have boundaries for yourself, not to try and attract someone.
If your frame breaks, the entire thing becomes unstable because you change. I've told this story before, but I had an ex-girlfriend and we were driving down a random, I'll never forget this, dude. It like burned in my brain. She literally told me, we had a stupid argument, something that as a man, you're not even mindful of that you're arguing. I'm just driving down the road. It's a dumb conversation that has no meaning or value in my life personally, but I supplicated in some manner in her eyes where I said, I'm sorry, my bad, I did that. Something of the nature. I had an apology or I apologized for whatever I did because I didn't give a shit. And she turned around to me shocked with a serious face and told me, wow, the guy I met would have never done that. You would have never let me get away with that. She, in that moment, man, was disgusted. I broke frame without even realizing it. Because my mind's on 100 different other things to do, get to this place. We have to be there at this time, blah, blah, blah. That I broke frame once. And she caught on to it right away and called me out on it. And that was one of that's not the beginning of the end, but I could tell you I had multiple frame breaks throughout that entire relationship that eventually ended it.
This is stupid. Boundaries are the lines we draw for ourselves in terms of our level of comfort around others, and it's important to be mindful of them because, for one, they're your boundaries, and for two, someone who keeps testing them, especially after being told about them, shows a lack of respect for you, not as a man, but as a person in general. Frame is just some nonsense that red pillers made up for who knows what reason, but it's not real. And do you really want to be with someone who's constantly testing you, who you constantly have to be on guard against? What kind of relationship is that?
Once you convince a woman to get in a relationship with you, or I should say you meet a woman, you start hooking up, and then she says, what are we? That's your peak. That right there represents your highest value in her eyes and her lowest. The gap is massive. As you're in a relationship and you have multiple frame breaks, small, you don't even notice them. That gap closes. Eventually, you fall in the love category. I love her. And you treat her with respect. That's where you end up right here. This is super dangerous.
Question answered. Relationships are women continually prodding the man to make sure he's still a man, and men treating the woman like a side piece so she doesn't think her value is higher than his and leaves. Presumably for someone who treats her like a side piece because loving and respecting your female partner is dangerous. This is so educational.
The reason they say you got to be the rock in a relationship, that stability, because that comes from a source of strength, from a position of power, that she can emotionally crash like a wave into you and you never move, you never break, and you never budge. You're way up here. She's always down here. But the moment you become unstable emotionally, you argue, you fight back, you get goaded into arguments by her testing you constantly, finding chinks in your armor to see if you're still a man. She'll constantly pick fights with you. The little shit test, that's on purpose. Without her even realizing. It's an evolutionary thing that they do without even recognizing it to just maintain, like, are you a man? Are you a man? They're poking you. Are you a man still?
If someone is shit testing you, leave them. That is not normal adult behavior. Legion goes on about this at length. Apparently, women are emotionally unstable, so we have to keep testing a man to ensure he's still a man and can protect us. And it occurs to me that if you do show love and respect to your partner, they won't have to test you to see if you're someone they can count on because they would be secure in the relationship. But who cares about reality? Let's talk about how you have to prove yourself a man until you're dead, because it's a woman's biological nature to test. And lucky for us, Legion decides to share an example of a man effortlessly passing these tests that women don't even know they're doing.
Like imagine you're walking down the street and you're going to get a coffee with your woman, and there's like 3-4 women that have checked you out. You can induce anxiety in your woman by simply saying hello, nodding your head, chatting up the barista. She seems super interested. Women are staring and you're staring back, right? Doing all that stuff without grabbing your woman's arm, without holding your woman's hand, without giving her a kiss on the cheek, without hugging her close, walking with her, arms locked together, stuff like that, right? Exerting your ownership over your woman, showing off that that's your woman, right? If you walk distant from one another, or she's in front of you or behind you, like out of sync like that, and you do all those things, you can induce anxiety in a woman. Now, that same guy, quote, let's call him the alpha Chad, he's got his arms locked with his woman, holding hands, giving her pecks, kisses, squeezing her ass, whatever, in public here and there, exerting his love, his affection, and his ownership of her. Women like that, especially in public.
I suspect that Legion has actually thought about this scenario more than most women have, but let me know in the comments. Do you enjoy it when your man exerts his ownership over you in public? Who knew such innocent gestures could be interpreted that way? In fact, I would say it's fairly natural for couples to walk hand in hand, so why he's making this a thing men with innate frame do is beyond me.
Why? Because you're showing everybody that's yours. She is mine, which makes her feel secure. So even if other women are looking at you and you walk by and there's another woman that's like really staring at you a long time, and women notice this, your girl will absolutely notice every single woman looking at you, and you bring her close and you give her a kiss, that completely crushes the anxiety. That's something you naturally like to do anyway, and the shit test gets averted. Now, if you do all the other stuff I told you, and then you get home, and then already from the car ride home, it's in her brain. Wow, all these women were looking at him. Why doesn't he walk with me in line? He didn't even hold my hand when we went into the coffee shop. He was talking to that girl a little longer than normal. Was he flirting with her? Does he not love me? All this crazy shit goes in their head. And then boom, you have a little fight that happens at home. It starts off with like, do I look good in this dress? Or what'd you think about my hair? Or did you see how that barista was hitting on you? And if you don't answer that question exactly how she wants it answered to get rid of that anxiety and abandonment feeling, that's boom. You just had a blow up argument right then and there. And this power dynamic is where the shift happens. There's a lot of nuances, man. A lot of this stuff can be avoided. You just have to learn it from top down. And once you learn it once, you understand that it's all behavioral and it mostly runs on autopilot for you when you do the due diligence of being, quote, a man's man, when you're a real man. When women say, I'm looking for a real man, that's that guy that they're picturing in their head, that guy that does all those things right.
What is this? It's dangerous to love and respect your female partner because then her value will rise and she'll leave you, but you should also preemptively reassure her so she doesn't turn into a nightmare. I'm getting a very distinct impression here. Legion doesn't consider women adult humans, and thus he encourages his viewers to treat women with the same bemused tolerance they would show to an irrational child. I don't understand how adults watch this and think, yup, legit.
Where she doesn't even have to think. She doesn't even have to feel all those crazy emotions. There is no more anxiety. She just sees other women looking after you. Competition anxiety is there because it just always is, but she is secure in her relationship, which makes her want to do more, be more acrobatic in bed, serve you more, please you more, support you more, because she wants to hold on to you. You do all that stuff wrong, you get the combativeness, the fighting, the ghosting, the arguing, then she's going to go and cheat. And then, as a form of like, oh my God, he's probably cheating on me. I can't hold on to this guy, blah, blah. And then it blows up in the whole other direction. Instead of having like the perfect girlfriend or the perfect wife, you have like a nightmare wife and a nightmare girlfriend.
I have a theory about why the women men like Legion describe sound like teens in their first relationship. Red Pill teaches that young women, ideally before age 23, are preferable when it comes to dating no matter the age of the man in question. And they take the behavior of girls and women in their teens and early 20s and apply it to women as a whole. And that is how we get things like women are ruled by their emotions and women are eternal children. And it hasn't escaped my notice that the modern women on Red Pill talk shows are more often than not represented by women no older than 25 who are typically on OnlyFans or are Instagram models. When in reality, well, most women are not on OnlyFans and most women are not wannabe Instagram models. And most women grow out of the that girl looked at my boyfriend too long. Is he interested in her? But this is on purpose. Immature women, insecure women are much easier to control. Anyway, Esther and the CEO talk about porn and sex bots, and Legion chimes in to say that those things will lead to population collapse on scales we never thought possible. For anyone wondering, Legion isn't in favor of sex bots, and neither am I for that matter. He ends the episode talking about addiction and how bad sex bots will be for society, and well, He seems concerned that this will lead to men gaining a lot of weight and never leaving their homes, while I'm concerned that the use of sex bots will dehumanize women further to men who indulge in them. Which reminds me of his consent rant from the start of the video, and did he ever tell us the reason women divorce men? I mean, we don't need a video to tell us that. We already have studies. The top 5 reasons per Forbes: lack of family support, infidelity, lack of compatibility, lack of intimacy, too much conflict or arguing. Did I miss something? Was divorce even mentioned in this video? Granted, this was a small portion of the original video. CEO's interview with Esther was 2 hours long, and Legion's was 35 minutes with his commentary. But I did scroll down to see if the comments were any help, and some feminists have stated that a husband having sex with his wife could be claimed by her she is being raped. So I wouldn't be so sure if she playfully said no and that you could read her mind, especially if she was working on a divorce decision or cover story. Our ancestors made it so simple. No sex before marriage. By marrying, you gave consent publicly. You could argue that empowering women has had catastrophic consequences for society. Nope, sex is a marital duty for a woman. That isn't debatable. Response to this? She agrees with this. Which part are you saying nope to? Original poster's response to that? She says sex is no longer just a woman's marital duty, but is also about her desires, her pleasure, her connection together. She's implying that before sex being marital duty for women, she needs to focus on her desires first, which isn't how it worked all this time before the 21st century. So basically, they want to go back to a time where they believe men owned women and could do whatever they wanted with them because women were men's property and had no rights. I'm just going to be blunt because I'm sick of this. Channels like Legion of Men claim to be helping men improve themselves, but the only thing they're helping men do is justify their misogyny. They borrow from facts, but make up their own conclusions. There were a lot of comments talking about how 70% of women file for divorce, but per the commenters and the channels they get these things from, women just divorce for no reason, just a whim. They decide they're tired of a man and they want to get some money to leave him. And for one, that's not how divorce works, and if someone is going to comment alimony, that's awarded to roughly 7% of women these days. It's not just a given. And for two, there is always a reason. And they also play into this notion that the men are just blindsided. And I call BS. You know when your marriage is in trouble, and if you don't know, well, that's a tell right there. And no, it's not about men being mind readers. It's about being present in your relationship and not expecting the woman to carry the whole thing. Marriage is not a favor men give women. It's something both parties should want and be involved in. And if you don't want to get married, that's fine. Don't. And if you do, date age-appropriate women and don't try to introduce insecurity into your relationship so she'll always feel like your value is higher than hers. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.